Mike, check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and pop culture is definitely influencing video game prices. And this is a topic that I briefly touched on yesterday, but I wanted to continue the conversation briefly this morning because we're seeing a shift in the way retro game prices are being impacted by social media, by big media, by movies, by television shows, and everything in between. And I think there is a new, this is a new era of retro game pricing that we're really entering in, and it's pretty interesting. If you go back to 2020, you'll remember that for pretty much the following 2 years, from 2020 till about 2022, every retro game, it seemed, was going up in price. It almost didn't matter what genre, what the console was. If it was a retro video game, its value was pretty much going up in price, and it seemed like retro game prices were going to continue to go up indefinitely. But then at the start of 2023, and all throughout 2024, we saw that retro game prices not only started to level off in a lot of cases, but in a good amount of cases, retro game prices started to actually go back down. It wasn't necessarily a burst of the bubble, or that the market was crashing, but we saw that the prices for retro video games were now starting to correct themselves back to some form of normalcy, going back to what the prices were prior to the inflated prices that were caused from all of the events of 2020. And what we're seeing is that, or what we saw rather, was there were definitely a lot of folks who were taking advantage of the price increases. There was a whole new wave of resellers that came on board, who were just pretty much buying up video games, and without really doing any kind of work, they were able to resell those games for profit. But that model was quickly dying down, and it quickly died down. And so we started to see less and less of that type of price inflation. And so now, when it comes to retro game prices, they've sort of kind of leveled off, in a lot of cases. But now, what we've been seeing over the past couple of years is we're seeing um, spikes in prices on certain games based on whatever's happening in movies, in the media at a certain time. And it almost feels like any bit of news or any bit of information can cause the price of certain games to spike. We saw it with the Wolverine and Deadpool movie, where once Wolverine and Deadpool was released, it was the number one movie in the country. And subsequently, a lot of the Wolverine video games and the Deadpool video game wound up shooting up in price. At one point, the Deadpool game on the PlayStation 4 was over $200. Wolverine, the Uncaged edition, at one point, that game reached heights of about $180. And, in large part, a lot of those prices have come back down to earth. I think now you can get Wolverine Uncaged for the PS3 for roughly 60 to 70 bucks. Deadpool has come down in price. But that's not the only time we saw something like that. We also saw that happen, um, even recently with the Video Game Awards. There was an announcement, for the sequel of Okami. And with that announcement came a surging interest in the Okami games. Now, pretty much almost any Okami game, whether regardless of what console it's on, maybe with the exception of the Wii, a lot of these Okami games have inflated in price now. The PlayStation 4 of Okami, I saw listings going for 250. But that only lasted for about a couple of days. I think after a while, people started to realize no one was going to pay that price for Okami. And then it started coming down to like 150. Then I saw people trying to sell it for $99 dollars. Right now, there's a copy of Okami on the PlayStation 2. I'm seeing copies listed for $50, for $70, where Okami, especially on the PlayStation 2, is really only like a $10 game. And so we've seen it. There's a lot of examples, right? A lot of examples. We saw it happen with the Spider-Man games when Spider-Man was popular. A lot of the Spider-Man games that came out on the PS3 and 360, those also surged in price. When you look at Web of Shadows, Edge of Time, and Shattered Dimensions. We've seen it happen across the board with a number of games. And so now it's Sonic's turn. And with the surge of the Sonic movie and with a lot of people being interested in Sonic all over again, now we're seeing this surge in price for certain Sonic games, right? Because this price jump isn't happening with all Sonic games. If you look at the original Sonic games, like the Sonic games that were released on the Sega Genesis, those games have been for the most part unaffected by the release of the Sonic movie. And I'm not sure if that's just because the Sega Genesis is too old. I don't know if it's because, those systems are so far back. But where the price increases have really taken a hold is somewhere in that sixth generation, because I'm not seeing much price spikes on Sonic games for like 7th gen consoles like the 360 or the PS3. Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Generations, Sonic Unleashed, a lot of those Sonic games that came out on 7th gen consoles haven't been affected, but for some reason, it's those 6th gen Sonic games that have really seen the biggest spike. When you think about games like Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, on the GameCube, it's Sonic Adventure DX and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, Shadow the Hedgehog, which was another game that was released during that era, also games like Sonic Gems. When you look at the 6th gen, it's that generation that's really seeing the biggest price increases. And so now Sonic Adventure, which really was like a $40 game maybe a month ago, now the price for this game is steadily rising. It's going up to $60, $70, $80. And Sonic Adventure 2, which was already a pretty pricey game, Sonic Adventure 2 is typically been like a $80 to $100 game. But now we're seeing the price of that game surge well above $100, 130, 150, 170, and we don't know how long the hype is going to last. So to me, do I think that the price inflation with these particular Sonic games are going to stick? I don't know, because I don't a big part of me says that no, it won't. I think these games will ultimately regress back to where they were before the hype of the movie, which will leave Sonic Adventure 2. This will probably remain like a $100 game, and this will probably still remain a $50 game. But I think one of the biggest reasons why it's it's the 6th generation that's seeing these price increases is because the 6th generation is old enough to solidly be considered as retro, but it's not so old and the graphics aren't so antiquated that um, it feels like out of touch for a lot of people. Also, I think that the demographic, we've hit the fever pitch nostalgia point for this generation of consoles. I think we've been over Atari nostalgia, NES nostalgia has been gone. That generation is over it. The SNES generation, there and Sega Genesis generation, there we're past that nostalgia group. I want to say over the last 2 or 3 years, we went past the N64, PlayStation, Sega Saturn nostalgia group, and now we're on that generation, that 6th generation nostalgia group, right? So I guess that would be the later millennials, probably people on the later end or on the tail end of the millennial generation. They're the ones that are, really looking for a lot of these PlayStation 2 games, these original Xbox games, these Dreamcast games, and I think that's why we're seeing the push there, and we're not seeing it on like Gen 7 consoles, because I don't think the nostalgia wave has really hit like the Xbox 360 and PS3 group yet. Doesn't mean that collectors haven't started already jumping on the 360 and PS3 wave, trying to get ahead of the price surge, because they've been doing that for the past few years, especially with the 360 store shutting down. But I think in terms of nostalgia, I think the tail end of the millennial group, they're the ones that are really feeling the nostalgia bug for these games. And so I think that's, in my opinion, what's contributing to the price increase. Like I said, do I think it's going to stick? No, but I think this serves as a really good example of how media, movies, pretty much anything that happens in pop culture and in society, how it's having an impact on retro game pricing. And this could be a trend that we see over the next couple of years. It could be a trend that we see over the next couple of years. The trend could die out this year. We'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But what I do know is that the rise of in pricing across the board of retro games is definitely over. But we'll still see certain games continue to go up in value, just depending on rarity and, obviously rarity, scarcity, how fun it is, all those factors, popularity, things of that nature, all of that will factor in. And then obviously the interest of the younger generation. Will the younger generation be interested in seeing what these games are about? And only time will tell. But let me know what you think down in the comments. Why do you think that it's only really the sixth gen games that have been affected by the Sonic movie? What do you think the factors are? I'm interested to know your thoughts. It's the Y2K Collector. I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.